Hey guys, welcome back. Today I've got a Briggs Stratton snowblower engine here. This engine is so hard to pull over. And let me show you here. And even the electric starter can barely turn this engine over as well, guys. So I can manage to turn it over, but it's way harder than normal. And a lot of the parts in the recoil here as well are all plastic. So if you keep trying to pull with this engine in this condition, you're going to end up breaking all the parts inside the recoil. So what I'm going to do here is diagnose this engine, guys. I'm going to show you how to do this, and I'm going to show you exactly what parts or part that you need to replace. Now, you'll mostly find these engines here on snowblowers, but the same principle of this repair here today will apply to many other Briggs & Stratton engines. Okay, so the first thing you want to do when you have an engine like this that is extremely hard to pull over is to remove the valve cover. And the reason you want to remove the valve cover is to check the valve lash. So what I like to do is keep the valve lash between the rocker arm and the valve stem at around 3 to 4 thousandths of an inch. And before adjusting the valves, what I'll do is I'll turn the engine over until one of the rocker arms is pushing down a valve. So this engine's hard to pull over. So at this point, I've got this valve here, which I believe is the intake valve. It's pushed in or open inside the head. This one is closed. So you can reach right in and check your valve lash. And on this one, it's pretty good. Now I did the same thing. I've got the exhaust valve opened up in the engine. So I'm going to check the valve lash on the intake. And that'll do it. Goes in there nice and firm, not too loose, not too tight. Now, the reason you want to check the valve lash before tearing open the engine is because if the valve lash is too large between the rocker arm and the valve stem, that will cause your engine to be extremely hard to pull over like it's doing right now. And the reason for that would be because the valves are not opening when they should, therefore causing way too much compression inside the cylinder. So that's not the case with this engine. I just wanted to show you guys this in case that this is the problem you have. So let's say the lash was too big between the valve stem and the rocker arm. What you would do is loosen the nut here. You'd have to hold this screw here with a Torx wrench. And basically you would turn this screw in and then tighten up the nut so that the lash isn't too large between the valve stem and the rocker arm. Now it's basically the same procedure as doing it on a lawn tractor, for an example. So I do have a full video on showing how to adjust valves, and I'll put the link in the video description so you can watch that video to give you a better idea on how to do this properly. So basically at this point, when you've checked your valves, they're okay. What you need to do is take off the sump cover right here. There's a bunch of 1/2-inch bolts here, and I've already drained the oil in this engine. And also don't forget, you have to remove the 5/16 bolt right here that holds the dipstick or the oil tube. So once you have the bolts all off, you want to pop that cover off. So I'm just tapping it with a brass hammer lightly here. So I'm just going to tap it from here. It's a bit tight on the top here. Now it should come off. Now if you got to keep pounding, guys, just grab a rubber mallet instead of a brass hammer. This one's really hard to get off. Usually they come off really easy. There we go. Okay, cover came off. Just a quick tip here, avoid the mistake I made today. If you see a bit of rust on the shaft, just clean it off with a 400 grit emery paper. It'll make the cover a lot easier to slide off. So some of you guys probably already know what's wrong with this motor. What it is the camshaft, the decompressor on it is broken off, like happens in many other Briggs & Stratton engines. Okay, so what makes these camshafts go bad is that the decompressor on them breaks off. And that's why the engine's so hard to pull over. So what I'm going to do here is basically pull the camshaft out. And I may have to turn the engine over just to make it easier to pull out. So what I've done here is turn the engine over until there is less pressure on the cam lobes. This makes it a lot easier to pull out. So when you do this, your valve lifters will fall out, and these as well. So just try to keep them in the same position as where they went, same location. And also when you work on these engines, take the plug out. It just makes it a lot easier to spin the engine over. So here's the camshaft. And you can see right here where the hole is, there's actually a pin that goes in there, a small lever and a spring. It's all gone. And you can see some marks on the camshaft. And you can also see some parts in the camshaft from the decompressor. There it is. Usually that does not cause problems inside the cylinder. It's very rare that I see that. So usually you're good to go by just replacing the camshaft. Now I do have another camshaft here from another engine that I saved, and you can see here what I mean by the part that's missing on the other one. So this small part here kind of bumps one of the valves open when you're pulling the engine over so that it's not so hard to pull. And if that piece is gone, like it is on this one, it'll cause the exact same problem that I'm showing you here today. But I always tell people check the valve adjustment first, because if your valves are out, it could simulate the same problem. Once they're adjusted good, then it's pretty well always this problem. And here's the part number for the camshaft for this specific engine, 795697 from Briggs. These are pretty expensive, guys. In Canada here, they retail for about 160 bucks. So it's pretty expensive. I'm sure my US viewers will pay a lot less. We always seem to pay a lot more here in Canada for these parts. Now I have seen these camshafts on Amazon as aftermarkets. I haven't used the aftermarket ones yet, but if you guys have, please let me know if they do last. I don't think they can be much worse than these, by the way, though, because I do get a lot of these in the shop with the exact same problem. And as far as I'm concerned, guys, this is not an issue that you should have with an engine for its entire life. This is just a new phenomenon that I've seen here in the last 10 years. So at this point here, what I'm going to do is clean the inside of the crankcase, clean all that out, make sure there's no parts left in there. I will clean off all the gasket material left on the engine, also on the sump cover as well. Now the sump gasket you'll need for this engine is part number 694953. Now this is a 1550 engine. It's one of the bigger snowblower engines, but the same gasket will fit on a lot of other engines like this, like the 1350 and the 1450. So with the camshaft off now, you can have a look to make sure nothing's too damaged. Now it is normal that you will see some pitting here from the parts breaking up. There's a bit of pitting on the connecting rod, but it won't affect how the engine runs. I've also double checked online to make sure the oil dipper here was shaped the way it should be. At first I thought it was bent, but it's not. It's okay, it's just made that way. Now what I'm going to do is clean off all the gasket material on the engine and also on the sump cover. You can use a scraper like this, but to save time I use a 3M Scotch-Brite pad like this on my die grinder. It works awesome. Now if you use this, make sure you don't push in too hard on the parts because it can take some of the metal off. And make sure you use safety glasses when you do this. Okay, so I've got everything cleaned up here. It's ready to go. I even sprayed some carb cleaner in here and wiped it up to make it nice and clean. And I've also got the sump cover ready. I've got the sump cover gasket ready here. Again, this gasket is part number 694953. Now what I like to do before I put a new gasket on is put a bit of gasket sealer. I'm using Permatex Moto Seal. You can use Durco or some other RTV silicone, it doesn't really matter. So I just put a nice thin film all around. It's not totally necessary, but I just like to do it just to make absolutely sure that I won't have any oil leaks. Now you don't really have to let the sealant dry before you put the gasket. So I'm just going to set it here for now. And I'll do the same with the sump cover. I'll just put a nice thin film all around and then put it on the engine. Now you'll remember when I went to take the sump cover off, it was very difficult because of the rust here. So I'm just going to spray it with a bit of WD-40. And I've got some 400 grit emery paper that I will just sand around the shaft here. So do that a few times, wipe it up, repeat the process. And this will make it a lot easier to get that sump cover back on. So now what I'm going to do is reinstall the push rods. I'm putting them back in the exact same position they came out. So I'll sit both of them in here. And I'm going to put the lifters underneath as well. So I'm just going to sit them here until I have the camshaft back in, and then I'll show you what to do after that. So just put them in the engine here. Now what I'm going to do is turn the crankshaft here until this small mark is down here somewhere so that I can match it to the mark on the camshaft. And here's the mark on the camshaft that needs to be lined up to that mark. And what I'll do is put a bit of oil on the camshaft so that it's pre-lubed here. Doesn't matter what oil you use. And here's a quick look. It's very critical that you line this up exactly like I'm showing you. If you don't do that, your engine will not run properly. Now, before putting the sump cover, I want to make sure that the push rods are installed correctly here. I don't want to take the adjustments out because they are okay. So what I will do is remove one at a time here, one of the rockers. You need an 8mm socket. So you don't need to undo the bolt completely. All you want is to be able to lift the rocker so you can get the push rod in right underneath here. And then you want to hand tighten it up and put it there fairly tight. Just use common sense. And just repeat the same process on this side. Now what I do here is I just turn the engine over because you want to make sure the valves are opening and closing properly, which they are. And then I like to double check that all the notches match together, just like that. And now we're ready to put the sump cover back on. Now I'm going to put a bit of oil here so that the sump cover goes on a bit easier on the crankshaft. And now just slide it over. Now you can tap it lightly just to get the cover on. Now get all these sump cover bolts on. So what I'll do here is just start them off with my impact at a low setting, and then I'm going to go back with a ratchet and a socket. And when you tighten up the bolts, you want to tighten them up in a diagonal pattern so the sump cover goes back on nice and even. And I'll just hand tighten it up by hand with a ratchet. Now I don't have the torque specs, guys, for this. Again, use common sense. I don't think that it's any much more than 100 inch-pounds. So just go around, tighten it up. Okay, so I put the spark plug back in, guys, because I want to make sure before it's all put together with oil that this actually fixed the engine. So let's pull it over. And what a difference. It is so much easier to pull over. You can actually pull it over with one hand. Now what's left to do is just basically put engine oil in there. This bolt here has to go to hold the tube here, so it's a small bolt. This little bolt here will go right there. Now you can put gasket sealer on the valve cover gasket if you want. Put the bolts back on and then you're all done. So I will do all that and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to start up this engine to make sure that it runs right. All right, so I've got it all gassed up and oiled up. If you're wondering what oil to put in here, you can use 5W30. You can use synthetic if you want. I just put in conventional oil. So I'm going to start it up now and I'm going to pull it by hand and hopefully this engine's okay to go. All right, got the key in, choke, primer. Now if you're running an engine in your shop, make sure it's well ventilated. Okay, so that's good, that engine's all right. And again, here's the camshaft. So if you get that problem where your engine is really hard to pull over, you might want to check the valve setting first, and then if that doesn't work, check the camshaft. And the same procedure will apply to all Briggs & Stratton engines. They're the only engines that I get camshafts that have a problem like this. I don't replace camshafts on any other engine that comes through my shop. And you can also get the same problem on the single cylinder overhead valve lawn tractor engines as well from Briggs. So just keep that in mind. You get a tractor or snowblower that comes in the shop, customer says I cannot pull it over. Right away you want to check the valve setting and the camshaft. So anyway, guys, let me know what you think about these engines and if you've had the same problems with your Briggs & Stratton engines as this one here. Also, I'd like you guys to comment if you have used the aftermarket camshafts that you can find on eBay and Amazon for these engines. Let me know if they're any good, because these are super expensive here in Canada. Like I said, they're way over $100 plus here, plus tax. So it gets quite expensive when you try to fix an older engine like that. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you're subscribed and that you like the video and share it. Have a great day.